Before we move on with the coding, I wanted to share a little anecdote or something that happened last night. I'm not terribly proud of it. So I was making this little app so that I'm able to, draw things and like show little diagrams using my iPad and be able to show it on the computer. And I'm developing it last night, and it's going really well. It's going really well, and then I found that like it was scrolling when I'd use the pencil to go up and down. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that'll be really easy, so I'll find out how to do that. And anyway, it turned into this thing where I was just, for about an hour, trying all these different CSS things, like all these different little, or like one thing after the other, and none of it was working. And I ended up just spitting the dummy and just like getting so frustrated. And I thought like, wow, this is like ridiculous, It's like over something so small. And I guess, I don't know, I was thinking about that, like why was I so upset, when things had been going so well, getting the computers talking to each other and everything. And it was interesting, it's like, maybe it was like, because this was something so small, or I thought that, it's not really that important, like, whether the screen scrolls slightly, that sort of thing. Because I thought that, I don't know, maybe that was why I was so upset about it not working. I don't know if that's helpful. Just to, I don't know, something to keep in mind. Like today, I was sort of like, I was doing other stuff, and I was thinking, okay, for each little thing, it doesn't matter how small it seems. Maybe I should just still be patient with it, and it's all part of learning and really knowing like the issue and knowing how something works. I ended up like that particular problem fixing it with like one line of CSS. I think it was just like putting the position to absolute or something like that. Anyway, I digress. Today we are looking at getting our database of our CSV file, and we're going to put that into Unity. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create some classes. We're going to need a class to load that database, and then a class to store the information. I'll start drawing this up. So we got our star. I'll just call it stars.csv. That's our HYG database. Stars.csv, and then we're going to create a database loader. So I'll just call that star database loader. Okay. So what's that going to do? That's going to know That's going to know about the stars. This is just a little bit of UML syntax. So the star database loader knows about the stars, and it's going to take that, which is essentially a really long string or an array of strings, one for each line. It's going to take that and put that into a star info. For each star, we'll have a star info object. Star info. Okay, so each star is going to be put into a star info object with typed variables. So for example, at the moment it's just a string, where we want to say, okay, well, if it's a position, we want that to be a vector 3. If it's a name, we want that to be a string. If it's like I don't know what else there is. IDs, we want them to be integers. This sort of thing. So we'll look in how to pass all that information, which we will be using I'll write it in. We're using a little utility class as well. That's just saying like, if it's an empty value, then make it a 0 or something like that. The one more thing I need to mention is that because we're going to be using scriptable objects, it's not like it'll just run on when you hit the play button. We don't want it to do that, because this is going to be eventually running like 120,000 lines. We want to know when we're pressing that button. We want to do that very deliberately. So we can use scriptable objects, which will exist outside of play mode. And because we're using scriptable objects, we're going to want a little button that we can press to load the database. And because we're going to be using more than just a star database as well, we're going to be using constellation databases. What we can do is we can inherit from a database loader class, which has been an abstract class, which means the database loader won't exist by itself. Well, I'll draw it up. So we've got a class called a database loader. And this is going to be an abstract class. So, which means that you can't, it won't exist. You can only have classes that inherit from it, which we'll be able to create instances of. And the database loader will have one function called load database, and we'll be able to create a database, an inspector for every class that inherits from the database loader. We'll be able to have a button that'll load the database, whether it's for stars or for constellations, etc. Okay, so I'll just draw that in. So we're also going to have a, I'm just going to say DL, database loader inspector, like that. And the database loader will inherit from a scriptable object. Oh yeah, I don't know if I mentioned, I'm trying out this new syntax, this UML syntax. So the triangle, the completely filled in triangle, that means inherits from, and the arrow just means, that one just means like knows about or is associated with, yeah. Okay, so the inspector will know about a loader and be able to show us a button that we'll be able to click on and load the thing up. Okay, so that's it for the explanation. Now we'll go ahead and jump right into it. There's a little bit of housekeeping I wanted to do before I completely open up Unity. Let's have a look. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this HYG reference, that reference file. This is the one that just tells us about all the fields and what they mean. I'm going to go ahead and move that inside the Unity databases folder, inside the assets. Oh, and this is something else that I was trying out. Oh no, that's right. That's from the last episode. Yeah. Okay. So we've got our sample, which is only 10 lines, and our full database, which is 119,000 lines. Okay. And the next thing I wanted to do is just go into the scenes. I'm going to rename this to main.unity, just a bit nicer to work with. And we can go ahead and open that up. Alright, I'm wanting to do everything that I do to the project on camera, but this next thing I'm going to do won't be relevant for anyone who isn't using Visual Studio Code, which is different from Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code is like a really lightweight text editor, as opposed to an IDE, integrated development environment, which brings in like compilers and everything like that. So what I'm going to do, because Visual Studio Code doesn't know how to create the .cs proj file, which is kind of like it points IntelliSense to where all the the Unity's library is and like all this sort of stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my project in Visual Studio and then close it, then open it up in Visual Studio Code. Anyway, yeah, that's just one thing I'm going to do for Visual Studio Code users. Okay, I'll create a new folder called scripts. And the first script we're going to make, let's just start with our, we'll start with it. We've got to make them all at once for any of them to work. So it doesn't really matter. I'd say we start with our database loader. That's going to be a really simple class. Okay, so what Visual Studio does when you first open this file is you'll notice that if we go back to our assets, our Unity folder, now we've got this assembly.c#-c#.cs proj. So what that's able to do is for example, if we write in something like vector3, it knows what a vector3 is, and it can tell us a bit about it. And Visual Studio Code will be able to do the same thing. Except I've got to open a Unity folder for it. Okay. Just hold on a minute. Okay, so now if I go into my asset scripts database loader folder, hopefully if I start typing in vector 3, oh no. Oh well. I'm not sure why IntelliSense isn't working, but we'll move on regardless. Okay, so now our database loader is going to inherit from scriptable objects. Oh, it is working. Okay. Inherit from scriptable objects, and it's going to be abstract, which means that you can't have an instance of this class. You can only create an instance of something that inherits from it. Okay, so it's abstract, and we're going to have one function in it called public void load database. Okay. So this function is going to be it's going to be abstract as well. So this is going to be a function that will implement in our star database loader or our constellation database loader, etc. Now for the inspector of this database loader, we're going to need to create a special folder called editor. The editor folder, it can be anywhere it wants. Like for example, this editor folder could be inside a subfolder of scripts, wherever, as long as it's called editor, just like that. Now we'll create a new class called a database loader inspector.cs. So this class is going to use Unity Engine as well as Unity Editor. We're going to have an attribute for this class. It's going to be called custom editor and type of database loader. Now the next part's important. It won't work otherwise. We need to say editor for child classes, and that's going to be true, which means that this is going to be an editor for our database loader, which is abstract, and every class that inherits from database loader. Okay, and now we'll create our class database loader inspector. It'll inherit from editor, which has a virtual function called onInspectorGUI. Now, what a virtual function does is it's like so I'll just show you right here. We've got our abstract function, which means you have to implement it in any child class. A virtual function is different because it is implemented in the parent class, but then you're able to do something else and then call that parent function. You know, so for example, what this one's called is onInspectorGUI. Now we want this class to render everything normally and then render something else as well. So we'll say base.onInspectorGUI, and now we're gonna get the instance of the database loader that this is the inspector for. Database loader target. Target is the name of the object that it's the inspector for. We just need to type it as a database inspector, a database loader. Okay, and now we're gonna create a button, and we're gonna say if the button gets pressed, we're gonna load the database. GUI layout dot button load database. dl.load database. Okay. We don't really need a parentheses around this because we're only using the one line. All right. So that's everything for our database loader inspector. Now we can go ahead and create our star database loader. Okay. We'll create our star database loader. Oopsie daisy .cs. And now we're going to use Unity Engine for now. And we're going to remember, because we're creating a scriptable object, what we need to do is have a way of creating an instance of that. It's not like a mono behavior or a game object. what we do is we use the asset menu to right click create, like you create a material. It's that kind of workflow. So we'll go create asset menu, and we've got to figure out what it's going to be called inside the asset menu. So we'll say menu name equals maybe star database Starchart slash databases slash star. That'll do. Okay, and so for now, we'll create our class, public class star database loader, which will inherit from database loader. And because it's inheriting from database loader, it's going to say, where's your load database? Because in database loader, we promised that in every class that inherits, we're going to need to have this load database function implemented. So we'll say public override void load database. And for now, let's just log it. So we'll say debug.log yay loading database. Okay, so now let's see how all that went. Let's see, inside, haven't decided exactly how to do this. For now, I'm just going to create a folder called scriptable objects. And inside here, we can right click, go to create, Starchart, databases, star. Here we go. And now we have our load database function, and when we press it, yay, loading database. Of course, that's not really what it's designed to do, right? We've got to make it actually load a database. So the next step is to get a text file into C# and then get that onto our star info class. So because we're going to be having a few different classes which will be importing text files, let's create a static utility class called like IO utility, input output utility, and inside there we'll have a function that's able to give us all the lines of the class, all the lines of the text file. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into inside scripts. I'm going to create a new folder, call that utilities, and inside there I'm going to create an IO utility.cs. That's going to use system.io, and it's also going to use link. If you haven't used link before, I'll explain a little bit as we go. It's kind of like a for loop, except what you're doing is you're having a function for each individual element of an array. So let's go ahead, let's see what that looks like. Public static class IO utility. Because this class is static, it means we don't need to have an instance of it to use its functions. Public static. This is gonna be our open a file and return for each line in that file, return a string, so an array of strings. And we'll just call it open lines. And we're gonna need the file path. Now that file path will be relative to the Unity project folder. Okay, and now our file path, what we've got to make sure, sometimes we have a backslash, which really should be a forward slash. It's just like a little, if you were to copy and paste, depending on what system you're on, let's say for example you copy and paste this file path, you might end up with a backslash, where we really want to just fix them all as forward slashes. So how we can do this, we can just say file path equals filepath.replace. We might think that we just go, oh, okay, let's replace every backslash with a forward slash. And there's a strange thing that's happened here. We've got this little, it's gone red there. It's because the backslash is what we call an escape character, which means it's got a special significance. For example, backslash n is new line, \t is tab. Like, so it's kind of like a special character that can have different meanings, but we really do mean \. So what we can do is we can go ahead and then add an @ symbol, and that's telling C#, yeah, no, just a \. And after we got that, we're just going to do a function called file.readAllLines of the file path. Now that's going to return an array of strings, which is every single line of the file that we're importing. The thing is, we want to be a little bit careful because we're going to be passing, because it's a comma separated value text document, we're going to be passing each different field, assuming that there's commas inside there, assuming that each line is a legitimate field. So we want to do a little bit of filtering of this data. So this is where we'll start to use link queries. So for example, we can say select l.trim. Okay, now this might look kind of weird if you haven't really seen this syntax before. This is a link query. So what this is saying select for each. Well, that's the IntelliSense is not helping there at all. But this is saying for each line, for each string inside this array, I want you to do something to them. For each line, so that's going to be a string, I want you to trim it, and that line is now going to equal the trimmed version of it. What trimming does is it removes all the white space at the beginning and all the white space at the end of a string. Okay, and that's great for that. And now we also want to say if it's empty or if there's nothing in the string, then we don't want it. So for example, at the end of a lot of CSV files or text files, there might just be a few spaces of white space. For example, at the bottom here, you can see there's a few lines here. We don't want that. We don't want it because that's not a real star. So we don't want to, get in trouble further down the road. So this is where we say where. In JavaScript, this would be filter. Select would be map in JavaScript if you're used to that. So where is saying only select the lines where it's not true that string dot is, this is where we'll go, system dot string dot is null or empty is false, if that makes sense. So for that line, if it's not true that it's null or empty, so if it's got something in it, then that's great. Then give it to us. And now we just needed to convert that to an array, because at the moment it's this link works in this file, this data type called an enumerable rather, and we're returning arrays. We're going to work with arrays. They're much faster than lists, and they're really So what we're just going to need to do there is you go ahead and convert it to an array, and this is what we will be returning. Okay, so that's our first link query for the series. All right, now where was that going? That was going inside our star database loader. So now let's go ahead and have a public string star file database path. And what we're going to do is on load database, we're going to say io_utility dot open lines database path, and so we just say lines equals sorry, I'm in like Python and JavaScript. All right, so string array lines equals io_utility dot open lines, and now let's just say lines dot, let's say, we can't do a for each, can we? For line, I'm trying to remember, for each. Come on. For line in lines. Does that work? All right. Debug.log line. Now, we're about to print out every single line in a document. If we did this with its 120,000 lines, I don't know what'll happen. I'm not going to suggest it. So let's just use our our sample database set to try this out. All right, so now we've got this database path here. We're going to go ahead and have a look at databases, hyg sample.csv. And down here at the bottom, I don't know if you can see that, it says assets databases, hyg sample.csv. That's our path. I don't know if we can copy. Oh, we can copy the path. There we go. So we'll go into our scriptable objects, database path, and let's see if we can paste that. Beautiful. All right. I'm going to clear the console and we'll go ahead and press print, and here we go. Look at that. We have our lines. Now it's looking a lot like gobbledygook at the moment, right? There's just like a whole bunch of numbers and letters, this sort of thing. The next step is to convert this into our star info class, which will be much cleaner. You know, that's where we'll say, oh, by the way, this line means this, that line means that. And I feel like this video is getting a little bit long, so we'll do that in the next video.